Welcome to the Oh So Spurs podcast. Today, we bring you another brilliant guest. He is well renowned on Twitter and Substack and other sources like Blue Sky. So go find the famous ProfSpur on there. How are you, Aaron?
I'm really well today. Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, no, thanks for coming on. It's been by popular request. We do a thing where we ask our members, who do you want on? And your names come up numerous times. We thought we'd reach out and thanks for coming on. We've also got Deej on. How are you, Deej?
Doing good. Recovering after, yesterday.
Yeah, it's been a little bit sore this morning, must say. I feel like I've run a marathon and I've got sore, everything aches, but it's Spurs who did it to me. And Stu, how are you? How is sunny Dubai?
It's all right. I'm knackered after staying up late last night for a game I wish I'd gone to bed for earlier. But we go again this weekend, don't we? We're a glutton for punishment. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah, the brilliant thing about football is it's round 50 games per season, not one, that you can pin your joy and misery on. So you will experience joy, misery, and mediocre moments all throughout the year at different times. So try not to take the lows too hard because the highs will come back. Be that Spurs winning the championship next year, or be that us turning a corner this season and winning a trophy. So, guys, I think the context of this podcast today was Ange used the analogy that, it always seems to be that when things are going well, a train seems to come in the other direction and hit us over, and everything possible that could go wrong out of our control does. And talking of things outside of our control and within our control, there were things in that performance that we felt were in the control of the manager, but there's a lot of things as well that have led to that difficult game and moment that are out of our control as well, that should be considered when you have these deflating moments and the world goes crazy on the internet and the algorithms throw the craziest parts of it in your face as aggressively as they can in the hope you'll click a reaction of some kind. But the performance itself, Aaron, we'll start with you as our guest. I mean, it was one where I think the biggest frustration I saw from a lot of fans was it just felt like we dropped a lot of our principles that had previously made us successful. And when I say successful, I think what I'm trying to say is people who have defended this project, us included, have always said, like, if we stick to these principles and we stick to these methodologies, it will turn a corner when you get the right players in and you get the right momentum going. But we seem to abandon those. Is that fair to say? Did you get that analysis of the game as well? And what was your kind of overall thoughts on what went wrong?
Yeah, I think there's something to that in the sense that not just yesterday, but I would say for quite a while now, we haven't really seen what quote unquote Ange ball is meant to be about. I mean, we're not really pressing with the intensity that we were at the beginning of the season. We're not pushing everybody forward to the extent that we have in previous times of the season. I think part of that is a big part of that is just a matter of personnel and injuries and fatigue. I know people are tired of hearing that as an explanation. Some people will want to call it an excuse, but I think you just can't play front foot pressing football twice a week for 2 months and continue to make things happen. But at the same time, I think there are some fair criticisms of what was within our control yesterday. I mean, for one, I thought we lacked a lot of composure and maybe didn't quite rise to the occasion. We forced a lot of passes wide, a lot of passes or clearances back through the middle that invited pressure back onto ourselves. And again, maybe part of that is fatigue and who's in and who's not in. But I thought we sort of lacked a lot of composure against their very lively press.
And I'll drop in the members' questions as we go today, because we're going to do a separate pod on Q&A. But Kem, on that note, you mentioned certain players there. Kem raised a good question. Do we have too many, and I'll pass one to you, Stu, do we have is it the younger players and their inexperience that's, causing some of these challenges at the moment, with certain players not, playing to the level we know they're capable of? Or is it the senior players that you expect to be at that level not performing where you expect them, or is it something else?
Ange was actually asked that question today during his presser, and I think he made a very good point. There's not many senior players actually out there. There's probably Biss, Bentancur, and Sonny, and maybe Davis at yesterday as well, which he's only just come back. And so it's kind of hard when you've got more youngsters than senior players for the senior players, I think, to really have a big influence. That said, I do think the unfortunate rapid decline of Sonny does seem to be having an impact because the only thing that I thought was going to save us yesterday was getting a quick early goal to kind of quieten the Anfield crowd. And obviously that didn't happen, and we needed Sonny to be on top form to get one of his typical breaks and so actions. And I think unfortunately that's a bit beyond him, and he's never been one of those kind of talkers on the pitch. He's been more of those, perform on the pitch. And we discussed earlier in the WhatsApp group about the middle of the pitch, probably the biggest area that we need to look at in the summer transfer window, because the likes of Biss and Bentancur really aren't carrying enough weight for us, I think, and that just didn't help quell the wave after wave that our defense is then having to cope with. But I think our youngsters in general have been doing a good job.
And kind of to what Aaron was saying earlier about, you can't keep this intensity up all the time, playing every 3 days. What Postecoglou's head of sports science was saying was, well, you can if you have 6 attacking players that you can confidently rotate between. What do you think about that? Do you feel if we went in the summer and we did sign another winger, Odegaard comes back nice and healthy, do we then, and we've got Tell, and we've replaced Richarlison, I'm talking about a best case scenario, not a Spurs scenario. Does that leave a position where you can play Ange Ball every 3 days? You don't have games like that?
I think we were in a position at the start of the season where you could play Ange Ball every 3 days because we had 6 wingers that I think you could comfortably rotate in and out. 7 if you count Mikey Moore getting into the squad, because we had Son, we had Odegaard, we had Richarlison, we had Solanke, and then we had Kulusevski, and we had Johnson. And then we had Mikey Moore. So that's 7 players you can rotate across that front 3. And how many games this season have we had the ability to rotate more than one of our normal starting 11 out in a game that isn't against, so it's like Europa League competition, like Elfsport? We just we haven't had that in so long because of injuries. So realistically, we could go buy more, but I don't even think that necessarily guarantees fixes the problem, because we have the players right now. They're just not able to get on the pitch. And that's what's it. Like I said, I hate to like ProfSpur said, I hate to beat the drum, but it's the injuries, man.
But it's we've gotten to a point now where people say it doesn't count anymore because you've said it too many times now, and it's boring is the quote. But
If
just
I tear my ACL and I say it a lot, I promise it's still torn. Like I get that it's frustrating to hear, and all you want to do, especially it's Tottenham. Tottenham get to you make fun of Tottenham all the time. Our own fans make fun of us. Everyone else makes fun of us. So when we have a valid excuse, it kind of sucks. Because usually we just we have a history of kind of throwing things away or not rising to the occasion, like the Champions League final in 2019, or losing to Leicester in the league, even though we came third. But this was, I genuinely think that if anyone sat back for a second and thought about it, and Aaron on his Substack made a really good comparison of what it would have looked like if Liverpool had the same injury crisis as we did, and that back line looks pretty bad. They would not have played to the same level as they did today, or as they did yesterday. So I think if you go player for player and you look at what it would have meant to any other club, I think you will very quickly see that it's not an excuse. It's just the fact of the matter that we're really injured and it's wearing our players out, and the way that we play is a way that is tiring, but we can't give them a rest because all the players that we brought in for cover, that we did bring in for cover, all got injured.
Yeah, it's a bit like when an airline cancels on you 10 minutes before your flight's meant to take off, and you'll say it's unacceptable, you have to get me on another flight, and they're going, yeah, but there's a storm, man. I can't get you on the plane, there's a storm. There's nothing I can do. And you're going, that is unacceptable, because you're so frustrated the fact you're going to go miss your wedding the next day, that you've booked on this beautiful Greek island or whatever it is. This is a terrible analogy, but you're getting the point. It doesn't matter how angry I am about the situation. It doesn't matter how much I demand it's inexcusable. It doesn't matter how much I say it's unfair. It's still there. The problem's still there. It's just, that doesn't make it go away. You can stomp your feet as loud as you want, and it's a human reaction to do that, and we all do it. And I feel that's what's happening is we're so angry at the situation you want to project, and the only way, the first projection point in football is the player or the manager. And then when you can't project anymore against them, you project against ownership and all those other kind of things. And I think that's where we are. We're just in this loop of blame. And then everyone has the one thing they hang their hat on, be it the transfers, be it the manager's tactics, be it an injury, be it whatever. There's so many different things that they just dig in and just go onto those things. And they don't go, actually, this is 10 things happening at once that are coinciding into one result, which is a situation that can't be fixed overnight. It's going to be fixed over months and a lot of money as well. We had another question from Vaz, Aaron. He said, controversial, but Van de Ven and Richarlison have missed a lot of football. I feel like we are stuck with Richie unless we take a huge loss. Van de Ven is harder, but if he continues to miss 50% of the season going forward, should we be planning ahead and looking to get someone else for that position next season?
Man, that's I mean, so with Richarlison, I think a lot of people probably feel this way too. I really like the guy. I like the way he carries himself. I like the fact that he makes our opponents angry at us. I like the fact that he runs hard and puts in challenges and puts himself about. And I like the fact that when he gets his run of 5 games between injuries, he scores 2 or 3 goals. So, it's not like he isn't productive when he's in there, but I am starting to lose a little bit of faith in his ability to stay fit. That has me concerned. I'm not going to worry about sunk costs and his fee at this point. But what I do worry more about is, can we make use of him as a player? Can we keep him on the pitch for long enough to fulfill his role and his job, because he is really effective when he's able to do that. So with him, I could see us moving on and taking the financial hit, because it's just been one thing after another. Van de Ven, I think, is a bit of a different situation, just because he's a bit younger, relatively new to the Premier League. You don't really know how that's going to pan out. And also, I think part of keeping singular players healthy is keeping a whole squad, healthy, is supporting the singular player by supporting the squad. And we've been sort of building this squad after this January window. I think we've done a bit more to provide cover in that back line. So I'm still optimistic that just having a good rotation of center backs who really fit that profile and can do what Postecoglou is asking of them and what the system demands of them will take a little bit of the physical pressure off of guys like Van de Ven.
And Stu, and just to finish off the injury topic as we flow into another question here from Howard. Out of the players, we do have some positive light at the end of the tunnel here. Let's hope it's not a light on the front of a train. But there are a lot of players returning. We have Udogi coming back, Vicario coming back, Solanke's not too far off, Van de Ven we just spoke about, Romero, Johnson's not too far away. Out of all these players, who do you think we need back the most to start to turn this corner?
It's a tough one, because I think we need both up front and at the back as much as each other. And I think, going back to the previous question about Mickey, was I think what's hit us most is both our starting centre backs missing a huge chunk of both last season and this season. It's not just one of them, but both of them missing substantial parts, which has hurt most. At the back, I would say Mickey, because I think he's just a game changer. Up front, I would it's a toss up between Solanke for me, because he's just immense. The work rate he puts in, he knows how to put the ball in the back of the net. And Odegaard, because I think Odegaard was the game changer that we bought, because he's the one player that I can see that's got the bag of tricks, that can take on a player and create that extra man versus defense, create the space to would open up, areas for the likes of Solanke and maybe the other winger to run in on. So those are the three I'd say that we're missing the most.
And the question from Sean, going on to the managing games as well and minutes. The squad's been leaked for our new Europa League squad, and it seems like we've brought in Spence, we've brought in who else we brought? Danso and
Tel.
who's it? Antel. So his question was, do we drop out Richie from that? But Fabrizio Romano's answered that for you, Sean. And in answer to your other question, what rule would you like to change about football? I think it would be if you're missing more than 8 players, you should be able to postpone a game. I think that would.
We would never finish the season.
We'd never finish. We would just combine 3 seasons into one, but it would be great. Yeah. So look, that's the injury topic. But another bit that comes down to, and it is related to it a lot, is the tactics. Now, Ange has often been told, by people who are very underqualified on this opinion, but they played for Liverpool, so they're allowed TV time. People like Jamie Carragher, that he has to adapt. You have to play low block. You have to play low block, and he's done that, and seems to have been roasted for playing a low block and dropping his DNA. So I was screaming at Telly, what do you want? What do you think that was the right move? You mentioned he had to do it, but do you think, regardless of the injuries, do you think there'd be an element of us going into that game more conservative, or do you think would have been, race horses out the blocks if we had a full healthy squad that had energy in that game? Do you put any of that on the tactics?
I do to an extent, but I think if you go back and you watch our games against a lot of these like higher quality opponents, like even like the Manchester City game where we won 4-0, I think we had like a relatively low possession number. We especially this season, even before the injury crisis got as bad as it was. I mean, even at Manchester City, we still had a fair few number of players out. But even back then, you could see that we had kind of adapted the way that we played against opposition, like of the level of Manchester City and Liverpool, to not necessarily be as front foot and leave ourselves as open as we do against other opposition. So I do think we probably would have been more conservative than our average game, even if we had the full squad at our disposal. That being said, I don't think we would have been as conservative as we were in this game. And I think that that's just down to being able to not cause any more injuries realistically, because at this point you're playing a game where you have to both protect a lead and protect the players, because we're like 1 or 2 players away from having multiple like academy kids in the starting 11, and that's just not a tenable position to be in the Premier League. Obviously we have a bunch of very talented young players, and I think that our new signings, I think, made a relatively good account of themselves for the positions that they were put in. I think yesterday showed why I think that Tel isn't going to be a long-term option as our number 9, unless he can bulk up a bit more, because I think he was pretty easily bullied off the ball. But I do think you got to see a little bit of his strengths as well, and I think that you'll be able to see them more when he's put into his more natural position in left wing, which I think was probably the plan until Richarlison got injured. But I guess now he's going to be our striker for the foreseeable future. The one thing I think is cool about that, though, is that it does allow for our entire front 3 to kind of rotate with each other, and they were kind of doing that when we had what little we had of the ball, where Son and Tel would switch places, and then sometimes Tel and Kulusevski would switch places, because we have no real number 9, but all of them can kind of play there. So I feel like it was almost a game of who gets shoved in the middle while the other 2 players get to play in the positions that they want to play. But yeah, I think to give a way longer-winded answer to a question that probably didn't need as long of an answer. Yes, I think we would have been more conservative, but I don't think we would have been as conservative. I do think that having players back and having had players back for like weeks, I think would have definitely changed the outcome of this game. Even if we had still lost, I'd very confident in saying it would not have been.
And Aaron, but how much tactics are obviously really important in football, but it's not as extreme as Redknapp used to say. It's a simple game. Get 11 good players and put them on the pitch, and they'll figure it out. It has evolved from that, but there is still some truth in that. And I feel so. I'm projecting my opinion. I'm not giving you a question. I'm going to give you the question instead. So, did the tactics matter so much in that game, or were Liverpool just far superior in every kind of way in terms of player quality, squad? And obviously, they've got a world-class manager. We wanted him when we were on our manager hunt, right? He's clearly fantastic. But if we put Pep Guardiola in charge of Spurs on loan for one game, would the result have been much different? Do you feel there was it down to tactics at the end, or really was it just down to Liverpool just being? I thought they were just sublime, but I'm interested to get someone else's perspective on that.
No, I think Liverpool are just really good. I think running into them at this point, where, as Ange said, they're more or less full strength. They're very settled. The front line and the options that they have there are terrifying, and they're terrifying for anybody, not just Spurs in an injury crisis. And running into them at this point is like running into a buzzsaw. I mean, it's just, I don't think that there's much that you can do to get around that. Now, I think why I think that is maybe the more interesting thing to say. And I think Stu was getting at this a moment ago, but I think when we don't have Romero and Van de Ven, when we don't have those center backs in, it really causes us problems in build up. It's not just defending, but it's the way that we play out from the back, and it's the ability to find that either in Van de Ven's case to carry through the press, shrugging people off left and right, or in Romero's case to find that really incisive line breaking pass. When we don't have that, and when we don't also have other key players in our back five, then we end up falling into this pattern where we keep forcing it, down the wings. Our opposition know that, and certainly slots Liverpool are onto that. So they just force us, right back into the middle and then right backwards, and we can't get out. And that's happened with a lot of opponents. But Liverpool, as good as they are, they really made us pay the price for that once they got going. And so I don't think there's a way to sort of tactics your way out of that type of deficit of player profile in that situation against such a good opposition. I don't think there's a way to really get out of that. And then more broadly, some people might have come across this. It was a little while ago, The Athletic did a kind of deep dive article on to what extent football managers matter in terms of results. And it's interesting, and I recommend people have a look if they haven't already. But among the findings that they came to is that, of course, tactics matter, of course, managers matter, but maybe not as much as we tend to project onto managers in this era of managers getting all the attention that they do. And we like to imagine that Pep Guardiola could just walk in and solve that problem. But good as he is, I think some problems are just not solvable by tactics alone. And yesterday was probably one of those.
And on that, so on tactics, I was talking today to a Premier League coach. I haven't told you guys this. He's going to come on the pod. He actually got his A license with Kieran McKenna. And he listens to the show and he wrote in and said, I want to come on and talk about some of this stuff, because what Anton McElhone had said was so right. And people need to understand this, that managers in the Premier League and coaches, we tell players as well to do things. We know that Pedro Porro leaves himself in way too much space at the back post. We know when X player is doing the same mistake over and over again. We know what you see, and we know that, and we spend time in rooms with graphs, with charts on the training pitch, trying to tell players not to do that and how to fix it. But it's really not that simple. They've got ways of playing ingrained in them from other clubs, from other roles. It's just how they play, and you sign a player based on natural attributes, positive attributes. As much as you come with a consequence of natural negative attributes that players have. And he said Ange was really interested in the press conference. If you listen to it from a coach's perspective, Ange mentioned didn't tell the players to do that. He mentioned something about telling the players to do something and them not doing it. And he said Ange it sounded like Ange had instructed his players to act differently on that pitch. And people have often said to Spurs, like, you need the leaders on the pitch who say, no, Ange, I'm not playing out the back, I'm hoofing it long. But when players get in that zone and they all start playing how the way they think it should run and lose the philosophy, things start to fall apart. But what I would say is Liverpool, for all their strengths, have the opposite issue where I just admire the leadership in that team. I was watching Van Dijk and Robertson. I thought, I know Van Dijk looks a bit like a magician on a cruise. I know Robertson's gobby. But my word, they are leaders. They are just the way they calmly orchestrate the team with orders and going over to teammates and reminding them where they should be and who said what. As Stu said, Son leads by example, not through words. And I just don't feel that. And it's not his fault because there's no one else in the squad to pick up that role of where's the enforcer? Where not Højbjerg pointing and screaming and falling over.
That's where it is.
I guess so. And you'd argue people like Romero have got a bit of it.
Another one that I think is a little bit underrated. Sorry to jump in, but one of our very own esteemed panel members' one of their favorite players, I think Vicario, is really good at setting players straight, and especially with like defensive structure. And I don't think Kinski has been here long enough to kind of garner that, or at least maybe he feels like he hasn't been there long enough to garner that respect. He's only 21. This is his first time in a top flight, and he's like, obviously he's going to take time to adapt. And like when we make defensive mistakes earlier in the season with Vicario, you would always see him yelling, pointing, reminding players like, do this, do this, do this. When we make a mistake now, you see Kinski giving like a thumbs up, or like, like he's not being as much of like a vocal leader from the back as Vicario was. And I think that's something that's another underrated loss from Vicario. And it's not Kinski's fault by any means. That's something he'll grow into, but it's really hard to be that kind of vocal leader at 21, coming from, I think this was like his first season starting, or first full season starting for at his old club before even coming here. So it's been a very rapid rise, and it takes time to like get to be that kind of leader, which is why captains are always, some of the oldest players on the pitch, because they've had time to generate that kind of personality. And
don't the kids call it aura?
Sure, yeah, we'll call it aura.
And it's so true. HG says, he's a popular figure amongst Spurs, like supporters group, if you follow the Cheese Room podcast. But he said, like, as he's a teacher, and he said, some teachers just get bullied by the class. They could be the most fantastic teacher in the world, but they just don't have aura. Whereas some, you just have aura. Everyone in the class sits, you all have the same level of control and authority, but some can control a room and some can't. And some can just walk in a room and everyone respects them. Other people can do all the right things and they just can't command. And that's fine. We've all got different strengths. Some people are fantastic members of a team. You don't have to have 11 leaders, but we definitely seem to need to find in this next transfer window someone who's as loud as Højbjerg, don't we? We're getting Vicario back, Stu, and you were right. I bet he's going to replace Kinski straight in that lineup. But do we need to go and sign a better version of Højbjerg?
It's something I think we've all been calling out for years. It seems to be, even in the kind of the glory days on the Poch, we didn't really have leaders. And I think that's also why in the big games we never got over the line. And I think the last really experienced leader we brought in was Davids, and that's a long time ago. But you need someone with that gravitas. And I think that's something that obviously with a policy, and we know why we're doing it, bringing in the youth players, etc. But I think this summer we really need to, and Ange has his character phone call to see if it's the right fit or not. I think he needs to, that's one of the attributes he needs to be looking for, not just the technical abilities, not just the tactical abilities, but who has the leadership abilities and characteristics to be able to drive a team on and help them in times like yesterday when we're under the cosh and feeling the pressure and just kind of tell everyone to calm down, get everyone level-headed and move on again. I think it's just one of the key issues, but it's not so easy to do because there aren't that many Roy Keanes out there, unfortunately.
No, but losing Perisic, even
Yeah.
though the easy age he is, I think we lost a leader. And it's not, people say the club's fault. He did his ACL, but it was out of control. And I think I agree. I'm trying to think back. I'd say maybe Rafael van der Vaart was maybe one who had an aura that, because he was from Real Madrid. So at that point for Spurs, we're like, oh, we got a shiny thing from Real Madrid. This guy's amazing. And he was amazing. And he had the winner's mentality from being at a club like that. And he did get us over the line in a couple of derbies. And Berbatov had it as well when we won the League Cup. I think it's not a coincidence, and you have 2 or 3 of those players in those squads when we won stuff. And when you don't have those players in your squads, you come up against these, and people say, yeah, we do win big moments. We've won big games against City, etc. But the biggest moments are when there's something massive to lose, not just 3 points. And I feel like we don't have that leader in those moments. I hope I'm wrong, because we've got the Europa League coming back, and Vicario et al. Can fill in now they're coming back from their injuries. But it's not going to be Brennan Johnson, is it? It's not going to be. It's not going to be calm. Udogie seems like a quiet, focused lad. He doesn't seem like a shouty guy either. So I don't know who else it's going to come from coming back. But there's a huge game in the FA Cup Sunday. Aaron, is that one you'd say if we didn't win, pressures on Ange's job again, or are they going to say, or is it all on the? Do you feel it's more on the Europa League, or do you feel that's irrelevant? As long as we're not getting relegated this year, the club's going to stick with him and see how it goes.
Tricky to understand what is going on with the club in terms of how they make these decisions, because it's pretty opaque usually, isn't it? But my sense is, if we can take anything from recent press conferences and recent transactions in the January window and recent reports as well, I kind of, and I don't know, you guys will have to check me on this, because it might just be some kind of perverse optimism trying to escape here. But I just kind of think we see this through this season and then regroup at the end, regardless of what happens in the cup competitions, barring any kind of absolutely disgraceful run of form. But I could be completely wrong about that. But that's at least what I think we should do. So apart from predicting, I think it's hard for me at this point to divorce my whatever prediction I would make from just the conviction that I have that for a club in a situation like Spurs, which I think is a relatively unique situation compared to the 4 or 5 kind of elite clubs that we're trying to catch up to, and everybody else who's trying to catch up to us, that we really have to be diligent and patient and complete a project. I think we need to get off this treadmill of just sort of reacting to every kind of setback.
It's the culture.
I've got my thoughts on that. That just based on how we haven't fired Ange this summer, considering any other manager with this result, would have been fired by now. I mean, how many? It's like 1 win in 10 or something ridiculous in the league. I think that we gave Ange a 4-year contract, which already out of the gate meant that we were looking at him long term. All the other managers were like 2 years, 2 plus 1, etc. We gave him a 4-year contract. Our transfer strategy has been youngsters, which I'm sure even Levy, in his lack of football knowledge, understands that youngsters are going to take time to season and be ready to really contribute. And again, this window, when we're under the cosh, he hasn't gone out and bought senior players. We brought in more youngsters. So I really do think that the club has agreed with Ange that this is a long-term project. As long as we don't get relegated, that we're sticking by him. They understand that we're going for a long-term youngster-led squad rebuild, and we're sticking by him. And I think that, and this again is Levy's own fault, but I think the club have got possibly the worst PR out of any club in the world, because Donna Cullen isn't doing her job. Because if is the strategy. All it takes is for the club to make some statements like that, saying, "This is the club strategy. This is what we're doing. This is our long-term plan." And it's just crickets. It's just continuously crickets from the club. And I think that helps to create the unrest amongst the fan base, which again is not what Levy wants, because then you got the whole crowd singing that they want him gone, which is just insane.
Do you think that indeed the club would do itself a favour if someone, let's not argue over who it should be, someone of a prominent position comes out and says, "We understand you fans must be feeling really shitty right now and things aren't going the way they are, but we do also recognise all these wider things that are causing it, and some of it is on us. But the manager's safe, he's staying, we've got his back, and this is going to be a 4-year plan for the club." Now, we can't go into what our ambitions are. We're not going to list out what trophies we're going to try and win, all that stuff. But just to give you guys a reassurance, we do see it coming. And you know what would be, I think, maybe it's too much into another way. What they could do is say, "We feel your pain. And by the way, at the end of the season, just don't raise the ticket prices, guys. Read the room. Not right now. Not right now. Wait till we've won a trophy and everyone's too busy celebrating. You're going to do that next." But do you think coming out with some kind of message like that would be wise, or does other clubs, do they do it? I don't really know. Genuine question.
I don't think. I mean, I can understand why they don't, because, like you said, I feel like if you do make that statement, you're kind of locking yourself in, regardless of what happens, and you do always kind of want to have that sort of, like, what if he then takes that as a way to, like, say that he has a get out of jail free card to say anything about the club, or, like, something else happens that's maybe not on the pitch related, not that it ever would. But I can understand why they wouldn't want to do that, just to, like, keep their options open. But I do think that they've kind of been sending signals that they're not planning on getting rid of him anytime soon. I think if you look at any um respectable journalist, anyone that I trust implicitly,
Ali Gold, even though you won't come on the pod, Ali, if you're listening, come on. Ditch last word on Spurs, mate. Come on, come to us. Anyway, go on, Ditch.
Yeah, but anyone that I trust, like him and like Ornstein, are like say that his job is safe, and then you've got people writing for, like, the Sun or the Daily Mail saying that, oh, if he doesn't win this game, his job's in trouble and he's gone. And because they all end up on the same aggregator account, people treat those two things as the same. They are not the same. I think that, for as much as, like, it would be nice if we just had more, like, transparency from the club, because I think we've honestly had about as much as Levy's comfortable with, in saying that, yeah, he's going to be here next season. And I think nothing said that stronger than when they were asking about Tell's loan, and Ange said, "I didn't sign him for 6 months." Like, that doesn't sound like a guy who's on the hot seat to me.
That's true. Okay, so I think we've kind of debunked some of the short to medium. Well, we haven't debunked anything. We've given our perspective on where we think things are. If you lift your head above the outrage, quite understandable, I think, from a lot of people right now. It's just going to be a tough. It's just a tough season. It just is what it is. I think I think it's different though, guys. When we were Spurs fans, like before, I think it was kind of like before the money became the main talking point of football. Like, it's gone from every season just being like, my players are better than yours, you're rubbish, we're amazing, every team fields 11 a-holes, and your guys are all cool, and you can win everything at the start of the season. You get a reality check at some point, and you realise you're not that good. But you still dream together, you live together, you go through it together. Then money came in, and it kind of became like all about who can spend. Then it was like who could win the transfer window, and all these leaks started to come out, and then that kind of became a thing. And now it's become also about legal fights. So it's like, these rules shouldn't exist, these rules should exist. Then it became types of chairmen and types of owners. Well, these things all still exist, and they swirl around now. It's gone so far beyond talking about who's got the best football player. It's gone to this crazy, crazy level where every Spurs fan or football fan in the Premier League is kind of, I imagine, they've learnt more about finance from following their football team than they probably did at school, because they're like passionate about it and you have to know about it. But that's not football. and it's exhausting at the same time that we have to go through this. And on that note, we are doing a special series on going over how we're structured, how much we're spending and why, and all that. And there's some really interesting stuff in there, by the way. But we're doing it with some people who work in finance. It's coming up. So subscribe if you want to see that. But yeah, it is just, it's not going to go away. It's not going to get better overnight because clubs facilitate much bigger pictures than we have as fans. They're Levy and et al. Are looking at getting $10 billion pounds out of Spurs at some point. And one bad season, they're not going to get it through one good season or one bad season. So they're not looking at it like we are. They're looking at it through a slightly different lens. And it is what it is. But yeah, I guess that's it really, guys. Is there any other comments anyone wanted to add before we wrap up?
The Villa game.
Villa game. Do you want to do some score predictions for the Villa games? You bring back some joy. You're not gonna. You can't predict a loss. Come on, guys. Do you expect us to see any changes to the lineup? Porro coming in, maybe. Anything else?
I mean, I think we'll probably see a new number 9, given that the last one, given that Richarlison's injured again. For lack of better option, I think it'll probably be Tell, but I don't know. Other than that, I think it'll probably remain more or less the same. Maybe Porro in. I did think it was pretty interesting that when Porro and Spence both played on the right, that he chose to put Spence at right wing instead of Porro. I think that might be more effective if they switched around, because I do think that Porro is way more adept at attacking, though I can understand, because I do think Spence's dribbling ability is better, so I can understand that if that's the thought process for that. But who knows? Maybe we'll see Spence at right wing again.
That'd be fun. Let's do it. Is Mikey Moore injured? Why was he not playing at right wing?
That's a great question. Probably does wanting to keep his minutes low, especially if you can look at Barcelona, since they've had their money troubles, to see a clinic on how to ruin a young player. And I think that we're being really careful to not do that. So yes, he's probably good enough to start every week, but his body is not developed enough to start every week, to play every week. And we have to be patient with that. And for as much as we complain about having injuries and say that, oh, it's Ange's fault that we're doing that, when we do stuff like that to take precautions against causing injuries, you're like, why did you play the player? So it's like a double-edged sword. But I do think that I think that we're doing right by Mikey Moore in the long term for this. So I do think that I think it's the right call for him to feature more sparingly than maybe the fan base would want, and maybe more sparingly than he deserves to feature. But it's for the best for his long-term development, I think.
Okay. So you think there'll be only a change up front, but score-wise, Deej, go on, give us a prediction.
3-1. Well, I don't know.
3-1 Spurs. Go on, say it with some conviction. 3-1 Spurs.
3-1 Spurs, guaranteed.
Tell with a brace. Tell with the famous Desmond. What about you, Aaron? Any particular changes to line up, or similar to what Deej said, and what your score prediction is?
Yeah, hard to say about changes, depending, I guess, on whether we get some people back in. But Villa concede a lot of goals. So do we, but right now. But Villa concede a lot of goals, so I could say a 3-1 sounds pretty reasonable to me.
All right, Stu, are you going to round us up with some positivity? Are you going to go full Johnny?
No. The change I'd like, and I really hope, is that Kulu does come back into the middle, because I think he's wasted out on the right. That was the one thing that kind of did upset me about the lineup against Liverpool. I agree with Aaron. I think it is going to be a lot of goals, and it's Villa, a side that the media seems to love, but I think we tend to do quite well against them. So I'm going to go for a glorious goal fest 3-2 win for us.
3-2 win, love it. Yeah, I'll go for 2-0, a clean sheet against all odds, and 2 senior players coming back on the bench in Van der Ven and Romero to give everyone a mental lift, even though they're not fit enough to start. Just to have them on the bench, I think would just make... Do you remember when they came back against Chelsea and we just all felt blindly drunk with optimism just because they were back?
10 minutes.
And then Chelsea just... Why is it always against them? Why? I guarantee you, if we were in a final against them and the ball was whizzing into the top corner, a freaking seagull would fly down and deflect the ball over the bar. You'd just be like, why always against Chelsea? And then the seagull would then hit Solanke in the eye and blind him. It would just be like, why is it always against Chelsea? Why? But anyway, we finish with an Up the Spurs, Aaron, and roll on Sunday to a much chirpier discussion next week after a victory and discussions of our optimism as we go on to get a lot of players back and a decent run of fixtures coming up, starting with beating Man United at home and getting Amorim sacked. How about that? Go on, we can dream. Up the Spurs, guys.
Come on, you Spurs.